Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Thought Sparks podcast. I'm Rita McGrath, and my guest this week is Frank Rose, one of my colleagues at Columbia, where he runs our digital storytelling lab. He's an author of a couple of books, a journalist, and has had a long career in the intersection of technology, art, culture, media, that kind of thing. And he also runs an interesting competition called the Digital Dozen Awards, in which we're looking at that kind of first glimmers of what these new communication mediums are going to mean for us, for the culture, for life. So welcome, Frank. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Rita. Great to be here.
Indeed. So where should we go first? Maybe we start with your books. And I think the thing that you and I both share is this perspective on big technological changes, which is, sometimes when they finally kind of break through to consciousness, they feel as though they came out of nowhere. But in reality, they've often been burbling along for years, sometimes decades, before we really understand what they are.
Yes, absolutely. So that's kind of what happened with me. I spent most of the aughts, well, in fact, all of the aughts, as a writer for Wired magazine. And my focus was sort of on the intersection of media and technology. And at a certain point, maybe around 2006, 2007, I started to realize that the way people were telling stories was changing, and that it was changing in response to digital technology and the internet in particular. But more than that, not just the internet. And what happened was I did a couple of stories for Wired that really brought this home to me sort of after the fact. After I had done the stories, I realized what was really going on. The first was a piece on James Cameron in 3D. I went to Montreal to interview him. He was on the set of a movie, the first feature film. It was directed by someone else, of course, but the first feature film to be made using the 3D camera system that he and Vince Pace had invented. And while I was there, I, of course, asked him about Avatar, which was still about 3 years from coming out. It had not yet been greenlit. And what he said really fascinated me. He said that basically we are he didn't want to go into the story in any detail. It had not yet been greenlit. He wanted to just, talk a little bit about maybe what he was trying to do with it. And what he said was that for him, it's almost like a fractal experience. For the casual fan, the casual moviegoer, you can, just watch what's on the surface. For the more committed fan, you can go deeper and deeper, and the pattern will still hold. And that was a revelation to me, that way of thinking. The second piece that I did that had this influence on me was a couple of years later. It was about Year Zero, the Trent Reznor album, and a group called 42 Entertainment. Trent had created this essentially concept album, but then he realized that, in the digital age, there's no way to, there's no packaging, there's no liner notes, how are you going to convey the idea that it's a concept album? So he turned to this outfit, 42 Entertainment, which was in the business of creating alternate reality games. In other words, games essentially where you pretended that you were in some kind of alternate reality. And the alternate reality of Year Zero was that the United States has been taken over by a Christian military dictatorship, and bad stuff ensues. So that was another realization. And from that, I started to work on The Art of Immersion, which is my a book that came out in 2011, and essentially looked at how these changes were happening and what they meant.
And I think this whole concept of immersion is so interesting because, if you think about, and I know you teach a wonderful course on storytelling here at Columbia. If you think about what really moves people, it's not spreadsheets, it's not PowerPoints, it's not it's these stories that wrap us up in just alternative ways of thinking. My colleague often uses the example of Dexter, the serial killer.
Right.
By any objective sense, rooting for a serial killer to be successful is probably not a very wholesome activity. And yet we get so wrapped up in the story that's what ends up happening.
Right, exactly. And, no surprise. I mean, first off, we're in certain circumstances, such as the one in Dexter, we're naturally inclined to root for the serial killer because, justice and courts, it all takes too long. Why not just, go for it? And but the other thing is really that stories create our reality. They create our sense of reality, and they are. What I realized as I was working on the Art of Immersion was that stories have become nonlinear, participatory, and immersive. And immersive is, it's kind of the ultimate complement. Mike Manello, a friend of mine who works at an agency called Campfire, remarked that in an attention economy, immersiveness is sort of the ultimate complement, right? It's the ultimate form of attention, and I think that's really true. So, by the attention economy, of course, what we really mean is that, information, which always used to be scarce, is now abundant, and attention, which always used to be abundant, is now scarce. So everything has flipped, and I think that goes a long way to explaining the appeal of immersive experiences, whether it's something like Punch Drunk, an alternate reality game like Year Zero, or alternate realities that people are experiencing now when they succumb to conspiracy theories and that sort of thing. And it's all different forms of immersiveness. I feel that people are increasingly wanting a theater without a proscenium arch, art without a frame. We want to just go in there and be part of it.
Super interesting. It fits to me with this huge transition that we're in from, the world of petrochemicals, highways, suburbs, appliances, that sort of whole post-World War II environment. And we're really hurtling towards something quite different, which is going to be digital. I read an article just this morning, in fact, which was saying that if you think about intangible assets, so if you think about the assets a firm owns, right, or the investments that it's made, that historically, the things we value, the things we put on our balance sheets have been tangible assets. So property, plant, equipment, that kind of thing. But that if you look at the large publicly traded corporations of today, as much as 70% of the assets that they own are actually intangible. And so they don't get accounted for on the balance sheet. You kind of almost don't see them with our last millennium set of accounting systems. And when you talk about currency being attention, I think that's very, very relevant to the fact that so much of what the major firms today are doing is really not expressed in, atoms, right? It's expressed in these bytes and bits. And I think you're really onto something when you think about the story as being the thing that kind of brings people in and holds them together.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. And the ironic part to me is that for decades, American psychologists, even cognitive psychologists, sort of dismissed the importance of stories. To them, it was sort of, it was just entertainment. It was frivolous. It was, maybe a movie, maybe a TV show, at worst a soap opera. The truth is that all of those things are critically important to the way we see the world. And of course, not just not just media properties, but what we are, what our friends tell us, what we tell our friends, what we tell ourselves, what we tell ourselves about who we are and what we're doing and why. All of those things are stories, and all of those things go into our concept of reality. What has happened in the last 25 years or so is that cognitive psychologists in particular, and of course with a big amount of input from cognitive science, from neuroscience, have realized that stories are so important. Jerome Bruner, the psychologist, famous psychologist who was largely responsible for the cognitive revolution in the 1950s, wrote a book in, I believe it was 1985, in which he pointed all this out. It took, the rest of the profession about 15 years or so to catch up with him, but they certainly have with a vengeance now.
And so then your second book, the Sea We Swim In, and you and I had a podcast conversation about that when it first came out. But that really goes through almost the anatomy of how you construct stories and how stories can kind of stand apart from the reality on which they're based. And I think this is such an interesting moment in history to be considering this, because given a choice between the dry facts and the stuff you might read in an annual report and the lively story that gets presented that's believable, you want it to be true, that sometimes that's more compelling than the actual information that we regard as the truth, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, people think that the way to change someone's opinion is with facts and figures and statistics, and that's just absolutely wrong. There's a very small, very limited number of people that might work on. They tend to be economists. But,
Indeed.
But for most of us, myself included, stories are the way to go. And the reason for that, I think, there are several reasons, but one of the main reasons is that stories, they hit us in the emotions, and emotions are really critical. Emotions are, we prefer not to think this way, but emotions are what we live by. And we have this sort of pretense that we're rational creatures, that all of this stuff, everything that we do makes sense. In fact, we're kind of a weird amalgam of emotions, ideas, thoughts, and the stories we tell ourselves and each other.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that one of my colleagues who teaches persuasion, a gentleman named Bob Bontempo, you probably know Bob, and he talks about, if you really do want to persuade someone, first of all, you have to have a good story, but it also has to fit in what he calls their zone of acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Once you go into the zone of rejection, now you become them. Now it's them, and that's where we have conflict. So I think this whole thing you see on social media where people are like insulting each other and shouting at each other, and it may feel good in the moment, to send off that nasty X, but if you really want to change someone's mind, it's going to be a very long, slow, different process, and it happens through stories.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. It is a very long, slow process, and it's often one-on-one, and you absolutely can't make fun of whoever you're trying to persuade. You can't you can't get angry at them. You can't think they're an idiot. All of those things. And I think that's one of the problems one of several problems that the Democratic Party had in the last election. People were feeling. Many people were feeling very, vulnerable to inflation and that sort of thing. It didn't really matter to them that inflation was a largely worldwide phenomenon in the wake of the pandemic. So the democratic response was like basically, who are you going to believe, us or your lying pocketbook? So no wonder it didn't work. That's just one of many examples. But it's a particularly powerful and current one, I think.
Well, it is, and I think the idea of finding a really compelling narrative that demonstrates that you're connected to things people care about and that shows respect for what their concerns are is a lot more credible, a lot more useful than sort of saying, well, all of our statistics say that everything's fine. What's your beef?
Right, exactly.
Not a very productive conversation to have. I'm with you on that, absolutely. So do you want to just briefly give an overview of the arc of creating the story? Maybe that would be useful for our listeners.
Sure. I mean, in the sea we swim in, I do just that. The Art of Immersion was basically about what's happening and why. And the sea we swim in, which came out originally in, I believe, 2021, and just came out in paperback a few months ago.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Really useful book.
I'm sorry?
It's a really useful book.
Great, thank you. So what I wanted to do was sort of create, we're all familiar, I think, with the narrative arc. I wanted to create a different sort of arc for storytelling in general, how it works. And, to me, it doesn't really matter if you're trying to tell the story in a movie, in a blog post, in a conversation with your friend, it's all the same. Virtual reality, it doesn't really matter. The basics are all the same. And I think I think the most important ones seem obvious, but it's very surprising how often people forget them. And by that, I mean the author, the audience, and the journey. You, as an author, you start off in one place and you hopefully will take your audience somewhere else. That's the journey. But the audience, it's all too easy to ignore the audience, to forget the audience, to forget who they are, and just talk about what you want to talk about and talk about it the way you want to talk about it, which is totally a mistake. So there's that. What I think is most useful and compelling about the book, though, is some stuff that comes in at the end, toward the end. The book is all about elements of stories. And, at the front, we have the author, the audience, and the journey. At the rear, we have what's called world building. We have narrative platforms, and we have immersion. And all of those are very closely related. World building is what we used to call the setting. Back when we watched movies and they were on a screen a long way away from us. But now, with this penchant for immersiveness, for desire for immersive experiences, what we are seeing is that people want to jump into the world that you've created. And, this is most obvious in fantasy stories, and in many cases, it certainly predates digital technology. You have Sherlock Holmes, you have The Lord of the Rings. Those are extremely immersive stories, and one of the main reasons they are so immersive is because the world is sort of constructed in a way that you feel you can join in. And the next step, I think, is what I call narrative platform. It's sort of a newly identified, I would say, a branch of platform economics, where instead of necessarily trying to, connect different groups of people, you're essentially trying to connect the same group of people to each other and to whatever story you're trying to tell. This is most obvious in entertainment properties. The Walking Dead did it in a totally brilliant way before they sort of lost the plot and went off into some other place. But you see it all over the place. You see it in a property, shall we say, like John Deere. John Deere makes tractors, and of course now they make digital assets that help you when you're driving a tractor, or obviously any other sort of farm implement or construction implement that they make. But John Deere has become so iconic that people want to be part of the world. And so you have in Illinois, in rural Illinois, you have the farmstead that the actual John Deere lived in. It has a huge blacksmith shop, surprise. And so you have this. It's a museum. You can go to it. It's like a branch of Williamsburg or something, and the one in Virginia, not the one in Brooklyn. And they have somewhere else. I think in Iowa they have a tractor museum, and little kids love it and that sort of thing. But it's gotten so extreme that, I read a story a couple of years ago about a farmer in Minnesota who was so involved in his John Deere tractors that when he died, he decided he wanted to be buried in a John Deere casket and in a funeral procession that was led by John Deere tractors. Now, of course, John Deere is not really in the business of making caskets, but they're not stupid. And they figured out, okay, we'll make a John Deere casket. And they did, green and yellow, the whole bit. And it was very popular. So
wow. So Frank, here's a little known thing that I'll reveal, which is one of my exercise go-tos is country music. And there's a country music song called John Deere Green about a young couple, and to show his affection, the young man in the couple climbs up to a local water tower and takes a big, huge heart on it in John Deere Green. And one of the lines is, the locals all said it should have been red, but it was all right by Janine. It was John Deere Green.
That's great. Absolutely.
Isn't that great? So one of the things that you and I have done together and that I've been very intrigued by is your work on the Digital Dozen Awards. Maybe we should talk about that a little bit, because what I like about this is for our listeners, you said, look, we never know what the new media are going to be teaching us. And it could be advertising, it could be games, it could be AI, it could be, immersive experiences, it could be robotics, who knows? And so you created this award to try to get a feel for the cutting edge of where these new technologies were leading us in the world of storytelling.
Yes, indeed. We created this award program actually 10 years ago. This year is our 10th anniversary. In April, we announced the new cohort, so to speak, and it was pretty fascinating. One of the things about the awards program that we started, and we're sort of transitioning toward calling it the Breakthroughs in Storytelling Awards, is that. As you suggested, we don't have categories. We feel that, number one, digital technology tends to erase categories, and there's no reason we should, try to support them artificially. And number two, everybody's trying to figure out how to use the same tools, and everybody's experimenting. So we need to be aware of that, and we need to, be aware that a tool that somebody is, or an approach that somebody is using as an artist could also be useful to an advertiser. and that sort of thing. All different types of stories are eligible. It's a very international awards program. And the fact that we don't have categories, I think, probably fed into the idea in the sea we swim in that we don't have categories there either. All forms of storytelling at root are essentially the same, just in terms of how they work. So what we have this year is, what we do is we announce 12 different stories, 12 different narrative projects that to us represent a new approach, a breakthrough of some sort. That's why they're called the Breakthroughs in Storytelling Awards. And so we have two sort of big prizes. One is the Breakthrough Prize. That's the one that gets the most votes in the polling that we do with members of the Columbia Digital Storytelling Lab and select members of the Columbia faculty, including yourself. And thank you for that. And so there's the Breakthrough Prize, and then there's a special jury prize as well. The special jury prize is something that the sort of core awards committee, which consists of myself, Lance Weiler, the founder and director of the Digital Storytelling Lab, and Aaron Mattis, who produces the whole thing for us. It's out of the 12, it's what we consider the most kind of out there, the most imaginative, the most, the one that takes you where you're least expecting to go. And so this year, the Breakthrough Prize was Eno, the film. As you probably know, Eno was a generative film. It did not involve AI, although many of our projects over the years, and increasingly in the last few years, have involved AI. But this is generative in the sense that Brian Eno uses the term, which is that it's nonlinear. And if you recall, I mentioned a few minutes ago, where we're going is stories that are nonlinear, participatory, and immersive. I would argue that Eno is certainly immersive, but in particular, it's nonlinear. You never see the same film twice. And there's a software program that was developed specifically for this film that makes sure that happens. Now, at the same time, we have 3 projects that were very much involved in AI, but in particular this year with robotics. And they all take a very different approach. One is from a group an art group in Brighton, England, called Blast Theory. And their project is called Royale. It's essentially a robot arm that has been, situated in a sort of environment for cats, right? So there are like 3 or 4 cats in there. The robot arm, plays with them and gives them food and does stuff like that. And it's kind of a laboratory to see how cats and perhaps by extension humans might interact with such a thing. Then there is a project called Fortuna. Fortuna and the Immortality Machine. It is by the artist Kara Walker, who's quite well known. And it is, I think, particularly fascinating. It involves a series of robots, really sort of animatronic creations. It's an installation at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. She's created it specifically for that space. And what you have is it's almost like a Victorian robot installation. So there are, robots that interact with one another, that it all has to do with blackness, and slavery hangs over it, like a dark cloud. And then there is the particular robot called Fortuna, which is like a soothsayer. She interacts with you as you stand in front of her, and every once in a while she will spit fortunes out of her mouth, like from a fortune cookie, and the fortunes are quite fun, quite ironic in many cases. But then the really out there project came from Russia originally. The creators are three people who called themselves, as a group, they called themselves Where Dogs Run. And in opposition to the invasion of Ukraine, they have relocated to Slovenia. And this is a project that's been going on in one form or another for several years. It was first introduced in St. Petersburg in Russia, a exhibition there. The latest iteration of it took place last year, first in a gallery in Ljubljana, the capital of Slovenia, and then at Linz in Austria at the Ars Electronica Festival. And what this is essentially a couple of small robot vehicles that interact with one another based on their sense of smell. And it's called Kerosene Chronicles Fungus. It plays on the fact that there is a fungus that grows naturally in, on gasoline and kerosene tanks and so forth. It's actually rather dangerous. So airliners spend a lot of time and money, or a fair amount at least, trying to eliminate it. But these people have sort of turned it into an experiment that has to do with altruism, that has to do with survival, and that simultaneously simulates social dynamics. Because what happens is the robots are designed to dock with one another, and they can exchange fuel. So when one of them is running low on fuel, it can dock with another one, which I said who, but what I mean, of course, is which will donate some fuel if it's feeling in a friendly mood or not.
That's so interesting. I remember the cat one. I thought that was adorable.
Yeah, that was fun.
Very cute. And the Fortuna one was very moving in a really different way. Really different.
Yeah. I saw it. I was in San Francisco in November of last year, and it was really extraordinary. It was quite an experience, and it's a huge installation. It's consists of 3 or 4 very large sort of platforms, and with robots interacting with one another or with the audience in each one. And the Fortuna in particular, the Fortuna robot is completely extraordinary, huge, very tall, and so therefore kind of dominating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really, really interesting. And what I love about these examples that you found over the years, and I remember there was one that I still remember. It was a computer animated ad for kale.
Right.
It was all these different. It was MailChimp. That's right. It was a MailChimp,
yes.
And they did a play on all the different ways that mail could be like rhymed with, and so there was kale chimp.
Exactly. Yeah, there was right. That one was called "Did You Mean MailChimp?" And it was actually inspired by MailChimp almost never advertises, but I think around 2014 or so, and this campaign came several years after that. But around 2014, they had a very simple ad on one of the first big deal podcasts, and so it was just an audio ad, and it consisted of asking different people how to pronounce MailChimp. And there was I think like a 10 or 12-year-old girl from Norway who was waiting in line outside an Apple store with her parents to buy the latest iPhone. And she kind of, she bumbled it. She said, "Mail chimp? Kimp? What?" and so they decided to play on that, and they created all of these different sort of experiences. Some were films, very miniature films. One was a product they made. This was called Fail Chips, and it consisted of a bag of potato chips that was all crumbs. And you couldn't buy the chips, but they did give them away. So. I think they were pretty popular.
So for getting attention, that kind of thing is priceless.
Yes, exactly.
So that's exciting. So I know another thing that you've been working on is you're a trustee of the estate of Martha Diamond, as I understand it. And
yes.
You and I met a few weeks ago, and you were describing her as an artist's artist, but that one of your goals is to try to let the rest of the world really be exposed to what she was doing in her life.
Yes, exactly. Martha was a very long time friend of mine. I think we first met sometime in the late 70s. And, she was an artist. She was a very, very powerful artist, I think. She was, as I say, a painter's painter, by which I mean she was not well known in the wider world, but she was held in very high esteem by other artists. People like David Sally, for example, Alex Katz, who a couple of years ago had a retrospective that took over the entire Guggenheim. And in fact, one of her early paintings, a small one, is right behind me. And her work is very interesting to see what's happening now, and as opposed to what happened then. I think then a lot of people, including critics, didn't really get it, didn't really understand what she was doing. And now the reaction is completely different. The New York Times ran a large review of a museum survey show that was up for several months until mid-May, was up for several months at the Aldrich Contemporary Art Museum in Ridgefield, Connecticut, which is sort of in the exurbs of New York, beyond Stamford and Darien and so forth. And the Times reviewer called it jaw-dropping. And I've seen that reaction literally from people who are seeing the work for the first time. And to my mind, there's an immersiveness to it. We tend to think that immersiveness has to do with new technologies. I think that's absolutely wrong. Yes, VR can be very interesting. It can sometimes be immersive, but it's not what's required. I think that, whether it's Martha's very, very large paintings, and I have one facing me that's about 9 feet high, and whether it's those or whether it's a punch-drunk production of immersive theater where you don't have a stage, you don't have a proscenium arch. The audience is free to move around and do anything they want to, practically. And so that is the kind of thing that is happening now. That's the kind of thing that is getting a response. And I think in a way, Martha was really ahead of her time. And so I find that I find that, really appealing to me. And I find it, it's very rewarding for her work. It's very rewarding to me to see the reaction that people are now having to her work. My only regret is that she's not around to experience it. But as David Sally once remarked, hers will be posthumous fame. I hope she enjoys it.
Well, that happened to a lot of artists. I mean, Vincent van Gogh,
Sure.
lifetime, was never recognized for what he'd done. I gather it was his brother's pretty relentless promotion of the work that eventually led to it catching on.
Yes, exactly. And in fact, it wasn't so much his brother, although his brother was a very important support for him. And they were very close. Theo was worked in an art gallery in Paris, and so he had a lot of connections. But Van Gogh, Vincent, never sold the painting in his lifetime. And Theo actually died about 6 months after Vincent did.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, and it was his widow, Jo, who took it upon herself to make Vincent famous and to make him, to get him recognized by the art world, because again, it was, the paintings were really out there. Nobody understood them, or very few people did. Theo did, fortunately, and his wife did. And it took her years. It was decades. It was a huge project. But certainly by the end, in the 1920s, she was successful.
Wow, I did not know that. That's fascinating. So you're going to be the widow of where the diamonds work.
Absolutely.
That's just amazing, and and bless you for doing that. You've showed me some of her work, and it's just stunning. The cityscapes and these big, broad, very brave kind of brushstrokes, and very, very dramatic, very, very immersive. I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. Especially the really large ones, but even the smaller ones, you can just sort of sink into them in a way.
That's great. So, what are some of the things you're working on now? What are you excited about these days?
As we speak, I've been working largely on the digital storytelling awards program, the Breakthroughs in Storytelling, and that is something that occupies me and Lance and Aaron for much of the last, basically from January through April. Mid-January to mid-April. This year, the awards were announced on April 13th, and we are following that. The awards presentation is done virtually, but we're following that with sort of IRL gathering, a summit at the Eleanor Boone and Monroe Film Center at Lincoln Center in New York, and that sort of brings me up to another point that I wanted to make, which is, I mentioned that you don't have to be, you don't have to rely on whiz-bang technology to create something immersive. I think, in fact, it's almost the opposite. I think that we value things that are scarce. I mean, look at gold. And what's happening now as we move more and more into a digital world, into a digital landscape, is that what's scarce is human-to-human interaction, direct, in real life interaction. And I think that is, that's hugely responsible for the appeal of Punch Drunk. I think it's I think that we want to connect with other people. We want to experience things with them, and anything that allows us to do that is going to be, successful, I think, or certainly have a shot at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's one thing that's really happening, and I think this idea of immersion and its relation to storytelling is all tied in with the idea that ultimately, as a species, we are mostly fascinated with ourselves. We are a very navel-gazing species, and we want to know about each other, interact with each other, tell stories to each other. It's all part of the same thing.
So interesting. It reminds me of some work that was done by a colleague of mine at Harvard, and his focus was on, his name's Thomas Wettelsberg, and his focus is on how have we defined a problem, right? So, one of the things we tend to do is we define a problem and then instantly come up with a solution, but he says, but have we really defined the problem well? And the story he uses, which I just love, is he said, well, so there was a building, and the tenants in the building, it was a commercial building, were all complaining that the elevators were too slow. And so, of course, the first round of solutions were things like, well, maybe we should stagger people's arrival and departure times so that they make sure the elevator's clear. Or maybe we should do a modernization of the elevator so that it can move more quickly. Or maybe we should, invest in one of those fancy computer programs. So, you're on the first floor and you punch in, I want to go to the 12th floor, and it says, go to car D4. It's like, all these technological solutions. And then someone who was much more wise in the ways of human behavior said, oh, you don't need to invest in any of that stuff. And the people who owned the building were saying, well, what do you mean? Why? What's your solution? And he said, oh, just put 2 mirrors on either side of the elevator.
Absolutely.
Completely disappear because there's absolutely nothing more fascinating than having the opportunity to stare at myself. So I'm not complaining about having to wait.
Right, exactly. Well, let's just say that the myth of Narcissus is not necessarily a myth.
Indeed. Absolutely, indeed. So how do our listeners get more involved with this stuff? How do they learn more about what you're doing? And could they have an opportunity to participate, perhaps?
Sure. Well, we're very involved with the Digital Storytelling Lab Awards program. We, as I say,
that's streaming live, right?
Yes, it's virtual, but it's live.
Uh-huh.
And what we do is we present the awards sort of one by one. We have a team of presenters, different people each year from usually from some aspect of digital technology or digital art, that sort of thing, and so they give like a 5-minute introduction to each program, and so that adds up to an hour. And then for the second hour, we have most of it is we go into breakout rooms with each breakout room has one of the presenters, or sometimes if they're not available, I will do it or Lance will do it. And a couple of the people who created these projects. And so you can, as a member of the audience in the breakout room, you can ask some questions and get a conversation going, which is really something I love. And as you may have figured out by now, I do really like in real life experiences. But there's something great about doing this virtually, because we do have projects from all over the world there, and that means that the people who accept them, who receive them, are not, they're not in New York with us. They're in London, they're in Paris, they're in Australia, they're in Korea, they're all over the place. And that means that we can all get together, virtually and talk about this stuff, which I think is great fun. And then at the end, of course, we have we present the Breakthrough Award and the Breakthrough Prize and the Special Jury Prize. So that's one thing We are this year. We have also created a summit. The following evening takes place, as I mentioned, in Lincoln Center, and that is, live in-person conversations, panel discussions, presentations, that sort of thing. My books are certainly, these two books are, both different approaches to the same subject, and I would highly recommend them.
I would too. I've enjoyed them.
Thank you. And I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram, and so always happy to answer questions. Just be part of the conversation. You can always reach me there. I have to say that I've moved on from X.
Yes. Did you see the Austria Airlines announcement?
Yes. I thought that was
so clever.
Yeah, indeed.
We decided to take the nearest exit.
Yeah, I imagine there's some Tesla dealers who would like to do that too, but
it's such crazy things. But the Tesla story is actually really interesting if you think about storytelling and business and how they connect. Their whole arc, certainly up until the Trump election, their whole arc was about saving the planet and defying gravity and being sort of unconventional in a cool way, and showing the world what digitally enhanced transportation could really be. And I think it was a fascinating business story, really compelling for a lot of people.
It really was, absolutely. And, I remember several years ago, I think it was maybe 2016 or something, I took a vacation in Norway, and which is a fabulous place. And on the drive in to Oslo from the airport, I got a cab driver who was driving a Tesla, and he was very proud of it, and he talked about it the whole way, which was great. And in Norway they have been giving subsidies for people who want to buy electric vehicles, and so makes it possible for a cab driver to have a Tesla. I'm afraid that I'm afraid that Elon has sort of lost the plot here. Lost that aspect of the story. He seems to have quite a different story he wants to tell. But whatever.
Well, I just think it's a really interesting example of free marketing. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Have not had to advertise. They've not had to do the conventional car company thing at all. I mean, no Super Bowl ads, none of that stuff. And yet, that amount of attention can be a liability under other circumstances.
Indeed. When I was writing The Sea We Swim In, we were talking about MailChimp earlier. One of the people I interviewed was the marketing head for MailChimp. And after the program, the campaign that we discussed, they did something completely different, which was they created this platform where, an online platform where they posted short films and all kinds of stuff like that. And it was just a very different way to connect with people, but it was very successful. And one of the things the guy I interviewed told me was it allowed them to identify the people who were going to be, really engaged with the brand and pay money to use it, as opposed to, just taking it as a freebie, which of course you could do. But what was most interesting that he said to me, I thought was, is completely different from advertising, because in advertising, You pay a lot of money for it. You pay more money to have it seen, to get it on TV or whatever, and then when you stop paying money, it goes away. And he said, this platform that we've created, which is essentially a narrative platform that's all about MailChimp, some of it directly, some of it indirectly, but all about the sort of, if not the product, then the ethos. This is something that we own, he said, and we don't have to spend money to keep it being shown. We just put it up there, and people respond to it. People interact with it, and at the end of the day, we own it. So I thought that was a very important insight and a very important demonstration of the idea of narrative platforms and how valuable they are.
Absolutely. And, when you talk about advertising, I've said for some time now that I think we're in the middle of a big bubble when it comes to the programmatic advertising. And I think part of the problem is it's not connected to a story, So I went out and bought a new suitcase a few months back from Briggs and Riley, which was a nice suitcase. It was good. But I mean, Frank, how often do you buy suitcases? I don't know about you, but like once every 10 years. And ever since then, the Briggs and Riley ads have been following me everywhere on the internet.
Right.
And I'm like, the moment of purchase has passed. You're just wasting your money.
Exactly. No, I think there's a lot of myths involved in digital advertising, and that is really one of the key ones. I go to Amazon, and Amazon is generally pretty efficient, although God help you if you search for something, and I do not find it very useful as a search engine, even for products I might want to buy, but they very explicitly show you who you are based on the products that you've bought or the products that you've looked at. And I have to say, judging from that, I have multiple personality disorder.
Well,
it's like crazy stuff.
Yeah. Both of us share in common the fact that I search all the time on stuff that is not personally relevant to me, but it's something I'm researching or I'm doing a project for someone. So I did a thing a while ago where I was exploring the prevalence of e-cigarettes in the context of the new vaping companies and all the controversy about getting kids addicted with these very sweet bits. And ever since then, I've been getting ads for, do you need smoking cessation help? Are you addicted to nicotine?
Right.
What must the world think of me? I don't know.
Let's just say it's important to clear your cookies every once in a while.
Anyway, this time has just flown. What a pleasure to reconnect with you. I'm looking forward to joining your lab. So, maybe doing some work together.
Absolutely.
And really enjoyed judging that most recent competition of the Breakthrough Storytelling Awards. So everyone, thank you, Frank Rose, my colleague at Columbia, and one of the leaders of our digital storytelling lab. And he runs a course on storytelling as well. So wonderful to be in touch, and talk to you soon.
Thank you, Rita. Really a delight to talk with you about all this stuff.
Indeed.